Your whole body is constantly in reaction to your environment on an emotional level. And nowadays, people know more about their iPhone than they know about their own body.
You are listening to the Perspective Podcast. This is a space for you who are longing to come back home, deeper into your own center and your own truth. This is a space for you who are longing to deepen the relationship to yourself and to others. My name is Madeleine Mofjärd, and in this space I invite you to explore conversations that in different ways touches upon the human experience. And I'm here to invite new perspectives. Hi and welcome, David Manning, to the Perspective Podcast.
Thank you for having me on. It's an honor. I always love to spread the word and talk about these things.
And now we're onto it. It's my honor and my privilege to sit down with you today, David. I've been really excited to and looking forward to this conversation because I think there's a lot of things and themes and perspectives that we can shine the light on together today. And I think before pressing play here, you mentioned that we're like opening a portal together with this conversation, and I'm so curious to see and to follow and to dive into this portal and see what will come through us today. Um, yeah.
Absolute, like what lies beyond the border of what I'm going to share about the whole consciousness of what is possible here. I am really honored to be the person that is opening that door for so many people. But once you walk through, you see there's a whole world, a whole another world, planet behind this wisdom when we dive into the depth of the body. So
Mm.
excited to be here shepherding this exploration, this study.
Yes, so beautiful. And I'm curious to hear, like, before we dive into this conversation, or as we're diving into it, how are you today? How is your heart, and how is it? How is the experience of being David today as we're sitting here?
Yes, so I'm a very cozy person, so I take a lot of time to get up, and so I've been very gentle with myself, and then to counter that, took an ice bath with my girlfriend, so I'm very, very good. Refreshed and have a sharp mind, and I'm ready to open this up. And yeah, thank you for asking.
Love it. And I think for the listeners, I'm assuming that a lot of people know you and know your work with new emotional release method and everything that you're blessing the world with. But I'm also sure there's people here that haven't heard about you before, who doesn't know you. So I'm curious to hear, like, is there anything like before diving into this conversation that you find meaningful for the listeners to know about you before we dive into this conversation? Like, who are you and what is good for them to know?
Yeah, I think beyond the horizon, there's just a new path that humanity can take in healing. I think it's been the health and wellness space, the mental health space, how people are healing has been so limited. And what we're doing out here is simply opening up a new path for humanity, a new way, a new frequency of healing. And that frequency seems to contradict some of the approaches that are out there, the therapeutic approaches of how we deal with our diseases and how we deal with our mental issues. You know, for example, we have on one side, we have a doctor that knows everything about our medical history, knows our dysfunctions on a physical level. On the other side, we have a psychotherapist, and a psychotherapist, he doesn't know much about your physical dysfunctions, but he knows about your history. He knows about your childhood. He knows about your patterns. But there's a disconnect there. These two things were never meant to be separate. These two things belong together. These two things are an expression of each other. And you have essentially now two people, two separate experts looking at you through a lens of pathology, through a lens of what's wrong with you. And this is why there is so much disconnect and so many problems there and so little solutions when the solutions for what we want, the world that we want to create, a world of connection, a world of embracing our humanity, embracing our vulnerability is right in front of our eyes. It's available. So I just want the listeners to be really open-minded to understand that um, this might contradict some of the people at some of the things they might think about healing or men about how mental health works, and open this up to a radical new possibility here for humanity. Yeah.
Mm. And why do you think that perspective has been so sort of hidden in a way, and that these parts that you're describing has been so separate? Like, why do you think that is? And what do you see as the new sort of like healing that we're approaching now and that you're doing with the work that you're doing?
I mean, some people call it like the patriarchy, some people call it the materialistic world, the capitalistic world, whatever we demonize in that moment. But essentially, the system that we're in really has gotten us very, very far, gotten us this technology, gotten us to be a global planet, a global civilization. But it has some flaws, and the shadows of the civilizations are the over emphasis of the materialistic world. So, science, for example, what we're going to discuss is scientific, but the scientific model is not a get expanded to understand and hold the true understanding of reality. And what I mean with is that science only has one part of reality figured out, and that's the materialistic world. But there's this whole nother dimension, the subjective reality, that isn't integrated into the scientific model. And so we have essentially the whole subjective dimension, which is your emotions, which is your intuition, which is how you feel. And that's being completely blended out into how you're how what's going on with your body. It's like how it's not how you feel. It's about, oh, these are the measurements. These are the pills that you should take, and how you feel is irrelevant. How your mother felt is irrelevant. We're not at all looking at the subjective, like how the emotional imprinting of your body is happening. It is such a huge part. I mean, you've been living in this body since you were born, and the first breath you took with this body, the first bite you ate with this body, the first kiss, the first time on a roller coaster, the first time walking, the first time speaking, the first time running and jumping. This body has been there all the way with all of your deepest experiences and the deepest emotions that came from these experiences is only felt through the body. And this unique dimension of experience, which is the emotions, is not being highlighted, not being understood. It's not understood that when your mother has troubling experiences, the fetus that is developing, which is you inside of the womb, is a sponge for the neurotransmitters and the hormones and the bioelectrical impulse of your mother. You're soaking in a state of another being, and you're becoming that state. And you're also guarding yourself against that state, against the negative emotions of your mother. And so your imprinting, your emotional imprinting is constantly happening. And we don't have any awareness of that. Nowadays, we know, okay, there's trauma, right? That's the most extreme of emotional imprinting. That's what we're aware about. But how does, you know, how are you affected when you eat a meal and you have an uncomfortable situation? Your whole gastrointestinal tract changes in response to that. Your fascia responds to that. Your whole body is constantly in reaction to your environment on an emotional level. And nowadays, people know more about their iPhone than they know about their own body. They don't know how their liver responds to an argument. They don't know how their lung responds. They don't know how their whole posture, their whole being, their face, everything transforms moment to moment. And so what we're trying to do is essentially um, highlight this deep, deep, deep understanding, which is right here, right under our nose, which has been ignored, right? Our intuition has been denied, because if a child is in school, for example, let's say you're in school and you're trying to tell the teacher, hey, I know we're supposed to solve these math problems right here, but I'm getting kind of tired. My energy is a little bit low. I'm going to take a walk, take some fresh air. And what is the teacher going to say? In most countries, in Western countries around the world, the teacher's going to say, what are you talking about? There's no break yet. Sit down and shut up and do the problem. So, this is how we teach our children and teach how we've been taught to dissociate from our body. Because when a child can't leave the room physically, what do? They leave the room mentally. And that's essentially dissociation. And so we have been taught from a very young age not to listen to our intuition, to think that our impulses are not valid and has to be first examined through a rational lens, always has to be in line with a rational understanding. But the rational understanding is a mental concept that comes after, that's overlaid on top of reality. It's not what's present here. And so we have never learned to be present with what's here. We have denied our intuition, denied our emotional impulses. And this is why so many people, especially women, feel collectively a lot that inside of them, there's a part that is crazy, that is absolutely crazy. And I know a lot of specifically women as a collective feminine wound, it's very hurtful when you call a woman crazy, for example. But this is because there is something there that there's been a part that has been denied and labeled crazy. There's been this intuition knocking, this impulses, this wild woman, this energy that wanted to be birthed from that human being that has never gotten space. And then in a dynamic with a man, usually this again is from the rational approach, which the men can handle much better. There's a suppression happening again there, and so women around the world are starting to do this work of releasing, of reclaiming their wild woman, of reclaiming these impulses and reclaiming their sexuality, because it has been just completely shunned in the society, and it's breaking to the surface, and it's very beautiful that people are having these reawakenings because yeah, it's if you go back into to the witch hunt, people intuition was systemically destroyed, right? And if we don't have if we don't have contact to our emotions, we don't have contact to our intuition. And that basically means we might have a map, which is our rational, but we don't have a GPS system. And intuition is a GPS system. And together with the map, we can really orient ourselves in reality. But if we only have one or the other, we're only able to see half the picture. And that's tragic. That's really freaking tragic to not have touch to our intuition, to
Mm.
not be able to know what our rhythms and cycles are, to be in tune with them, to intuit what we need, what our needs are. Not having that means you're almost half cut off from who you are. So it's like that's not good. And
Mm.
so reclaiming your emotion is a work to do to reactivate all these intrinsic human capabilities that we have.
Mm. And I hear you mention like that there's a sort of a collective healing, or that there's a healing happening in the collective feminine when it comes to sort of regaining the connection to our wild woman, to the archetype of the wild woman, and the intuition and these things. And I'm curious to hear from your perspective and the work that you're doing. What do you see as parts or archetypes or patterns within, if we choose to look at it like as a collective masculine, that you can see that needs healing within the collective masculine, then if the feminine's work is sort of, yeah, the wild woman, intuition, all of these things, then the masculine, where what do you see there as a pattern?
Yeah, so it's not that women need to reclaim their intuition and men need to reclaim something else. It's that we all need to reclaim our intuition. So the collective feminine, in a sense, is not what I mean with, I don't mean like all the women. It's not what I mean with collective. The collective feminine, I mean the feminine parts within women and men. That's what I mean with collective feminine. The collective masculine, meaning the masculine in women and men. That's what I mean with that. And so the integration is around the a lot about the feminine parts. But if we go into the masculine parts that need to be reclaimed, is that um, there needs to be a sense of integrity based on emotions. So this is something that we call dignity in our work. For example, your body has homeostasis. There's an intrinsic integrity of your body, how it is when it's healed. This intrinsic integrity is like your body knows what sickness is, your body knows what health is. Optimal functioning is intrinsic to the body. And it's to deviate when this deviates, we have chronic disease. So the body knows what health is, the body knows what chronic disease is. The same is true for the psyche. In the psyche, in the mind, we call this the dignity. The dignity is a type of inherent integrity, your untraumatized self, let's say. The way that your body is striving to regain to. It's trying to come back to this equilibrium of your dignity. Dignity is restored. It's kind of like a multi-dimensional integrity, which includes, for example, self-respect, but um, like your boundaries. Your boundaries are really, really, really important part of the masculine collective consciousness. Boundaries are what needs to be developed. And so when you never had boundaries in your life, when you don't know how to express anger, for example, you don't have touch to your, and you're not in touch with your boundaries because anger will naturally reintegrate into your body and restore your dignity, restore the sense of boundary within your body. And so boundaries are natural and intrinsic to your dignity. You have a natural sense of boundary without you. And you can see this in children. Children, they are really good at saying no. They don't want to be touched. They don't want to eat this. They don't want to eat that. But then you say, okay, no, but you have to finish the meal and you have to come here now and I'm dressing you. And you overwrite their intuition, you overwrite their dignity, and then you imprint your false dignity onto them, and they inherit that. They inherit now a skewed sense of boundaries, a skewed sense of dignity, guilt. And so basically what blocked emotions and trauma are doing is skewing this inherent sense of dignity that is within us, this inherent sense of um of self-worth, self-respect. The right to be here isn't a somatic right. The right to exist as a human being, the right to connect with other human beings, the right um, to feel powerful, to feel in charge of yourself, the right to express yourself. All these are inherent expressions of that dignity that through healing work are restored. Yeah,
Mm. And I, when it comes to like the emotion of anger, I find it so interesting because I tend to see a pattern of like anger being an emotion that very, like a lot of people have issues expressing, right? So I'm curious to hear if that's your experience as well, that this is an emotion that is hard for people to release or to allow, or yeah, that there's been a lot of suppression of the emotion, and also then like why is it so hard to allow anger in our bodies or in our systems or
absolutely. I mean, anger is a huge deal in our work, what we're doing, simply because collectively we haven't really create a welcome space for this emotion, right? We associate anger with destruction, And so when somebody outside at the traffic light starts to cry, people come like, "Oh, are you okay? Are you okay?" But if a person outside is like, "Ah, fucking hate these people," you take a step back naturally. So people haven't learned that if I'm expressing anger, I can experience connection. I am supported. I am welcome with my anger. And so because this is collectively the case, people are not supported in their expression of anger. And this is specifically true for because we're coming from a culture with strong family units. Now in the West, we've developed a little bit further. So we develop more as individuals. We move out of the family. But in cultures with strong family units, such as the case also Portugal, Spain, but also Asia has it really strongly. For example, very strong family unit. You are your family. You are there. You are meant to be. You're supporting your family till you die. That's expected of you. And so you take on a very, very different way of identifying yourself. You take on a way that's called the role ego. You become the good son. You stay in this role of the good son, and you're delivering. And anger is a process of owning your individuation. And individuation does not mean separation. Individuation means I start to take on and stabilize in my unique perspective, in what's my own, in my uniqueness. And so when this doesn't happen, this is not allowed, you essentially, everything that is experienced as individuation, everything that's experienced as something is seen as separation, is seen as uh, against the collective, against your family. So anger is saying no, it's the energy of saying no to things. And saying no is disruptive. It's uncomfortable. It's to say no to someone means you have to stop their expectations. Maybe they have the expectation. Yes, you have to be the force that stops them. And that's a process of individuation and really owning your individuality and your self-respect. And in the moment you own that, you become a beacon of informing the other how they should treat you. This is the responsibility that many people don't want to take. You have the responsibility of becoming the beacon that is teaching other people how to treat you and how to treat other humans. So if you don't show up and give that inf if you can inform the other person, that informing process doesn't happen. The other person is just going to stay in that state. And so this is very important that this collectively starts to happen more and more and more. And we do it through the emotion of anger, which is, by the way, deeply connected with the organ, the liver. The liver is pretty much on the right side of the body, right? The masculine side is dominating the abdomen. It's dominating this area and it's pushing the stomach to the side. It's even taking up space under the diaphragm. It just takes up a lot of space. It's the biggest inner organ. And so this is the energy that we need. The liver is is its role in the body is to detoxify blood. Anger is the emotion that removes the things that are toxic for you, the toxic people. So it's a detoxification organ. And this is why the sensitive fascial layer that is around the liver highly responds to repressed anger impulses. The liver wants you to feel powerful, to take your space, and to detoxify what is wrong with you. And we wouldn't be alive if we cannot say no, if we cannot kill people, if we cannot kill, we don't have an intrinsic sense of boundary. If we're not able to harm people, we don't have an intrinsic sense of boundary because our immune system, which is also deeply tied to our anger, is killing left and right millions of bacteria. T killer cells are working for us to kill ruthlessly cancer cells, viruses, bacteria, to keep our body clean, to keep our body healthy. If we don't do that on the outside, if we let toxic people rule our life, if toxic people take an influence on us, then we cannot survive in the most optimal way. We compromise our system, we compromise our immune system, we compromise our health, we compromise our psychological, mental well-being.
Mm. Yeah. And I think it's a beautiful metaphor for it. Of course, we shouldn't like kill people, but but as a metaphor, as like you're mentioning with the immune system, how the work is really to see what people do we want into our life and what people should we keep out. Like where is the no, where is the yes? And I'm curious to hear from you, like with the work that you're doing and the many people that you've met through your work, could you like, is there a pattern that you can see as like some of these symptoms, like the physical symptoms, that tend to show up in people's lives due to suppressed emotions? It doesn't only have to be anger, of course, but like trauma, suppressed emotions. What are the most common symptoms that you see out there?
Absolutely. And let's dive into this. So, what I see looking at the body and looking at human beings, there's a very direct correlation. What we see, there's three types of different states in the body. There's a state of health, and then there's two states of dysregulation. Two states, not one state, two states of dysregulation. And the state of health explains itself. A healthy functioning organ, healthy functioning communication of the cells with other cells, healthy functioning regulation within the nervous system. Also, the awareness is present in that part of the body, the tissue. But the two states of dysregulation, one is a state of overcompensation. This is when you this is the first level of dysfunction. So we for example, there's a Scandinavian researchers, bodynamic are they called? They've studied the whole body, the muscles of the whole body through a developmental lens, which means they look at children, babies, teenagers, adults, elders, and they see which muscle groups are active in their bodies. And what they see is a pretty interesting picture. They start to see a mosaic of the psyche that is playing out through the muscle groups. So, because they've been using a muscle test to test the coding of the body through the muscles, which is either a compensatory state, which is a state of too much energy present in the muscles, or a state of giving up, a state of shutdown in the muscles, which is a lack of energy. And depending on where the body is overcompensating or shut down, says everything about what stage of development a human being has been held back in, which stage of development uh, you are overdeveloped or underdeveloped, or if you have mental health issues. All of this can be seen from the coding of the body. This is just the muscles. This also happens internally. When you have symptoms, for example, a symptom of inflammation is a symptom where the body is rushing blood towards it, rushing cytokines, rushing inflammatory markers. Everything is coming there to try to heal the body, and there is an accumulation of energy there. There is a accumulation of trying to fix the problem, and the body's over focusing on it, and usually it's painful in that stage. That's the first state of regulate dysregulation, because that's a state of overcompensation. It's it's what we usually call in the body inflammation. Inflammation is tied to the sympathetic nervous system. So there's also three states in the nervous system. So there's the healthy regulated nervous system, there's the hyperactive nervous system, which is sympathetic state, and then there is the immobilized freeze state of the nervous system, right? The parasympathetic state. And so these three states as well, they play themselves out in the body. And this has everything to do with disease, everything to do with how we feel. So um, if you have inflammation, that's a sympathetic state in the body that's been locked there. So any type of inflammation, you have pain in your tooth, if you have gut issues, or if you have endometriosis, it can be combined with inflammation. Anything that's tied to that is tied to an overcompensation response. And usually, this is connected with anger on some level. This is connected with inflammation in the body. Just think anger. Uh, then you have another state. When this state is not taken care of, the state of pain, the state of chronic pain is not taken care of. Chronic pain starts to dissipate, actually. It starts to become so chronic that you don't even notice it anymore. And that's when the body starts to shut down the area of the body. So if you don't take care of a certain symptom, the body at some point starts to shut down with it and starts to live with it. At that point, the body starts to retract blood from it. The cells start to go into a freeze response. They stop communicating. They communicate less and less, and energy gets stored and trapped and frozen in the tissue. And that's when we have, for example, amenorrhea is an example of that. If you have painful periods, that's a level one response. Then um, uh, having no period at all is a level two response. It's a shutdown response of the body. And so numbness in the body essentially is the last stage. So numbness, in a sense, to remember this, is worse than pain. Being numb in the body is worse than having pain because the body is shutting itself down. And this really usually goes along with the emotions of helplessness, powerlessness, and um, and um, and intense meaninglessness that is stored within the tissue of the body. When you start to work and wake up this tissue again, you start to see those emotions that are lacking, resources that are lacking support to be processed. And so you have three states in the body that are universally showing up. Inflammation, anger, and numbness is usually tied to grief, helplessness, and powerlessness.
Hmm. And so if someone is listening and they feel like, oh, that's me, I'm either numb in my body or parts in my body, or I have inflammation or pain or whatever it might be, what are some of the modalities or some of the ways that we can work with our emotions and our psyche in order to heal those patterns within our bodies? Like what is a way that we can choose to do this healing?
Yeah, first we have to understand we need the right education. We need to understand that our body, most people, they think, oh, I have back pain because I was laying wrong. I sprained my ankle because I was running wrong. I have this and this pain because of this and this too loud music or whatever. But that's not what's happening in the body. Those are trigger moments that trigger the already decompensated part of the body. That means that your body is already struggling, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. This is just a drop that makes that I don't know how you say that in English. This is just a part that the body can't compensate anymore. Okay, so if you lay wrong, it's not because that the body hasn't forgotten how to regulate its own muscles. It's because there's already something present in the tissue that the body can compensate. And so what most people do is say, yeah, it's purely physical because I strained my ankle, I was laying wrong, I was listening to loud music, and then they explain themselves, backwards rationalize that their situation is simply because um, of the trigger. But it's actually much deeper than that. Actually, the body is a master at orchestrating healing in the body, is genius at orchestrating healing in the body. But there's parts where the body just struggles to compensate for. And these parts where the body struggles the most are usually tied to a core wounding. So I believe in what's called a core wounding, a primary dysfunctions in the body. This is what many osteopaths work with, a primary dysfunction. There's secondary dysfunctions, which are caused by the primary dysfunctions. For example, pain in the right shoulder can be caused as a secondary dysfunction that might be caused by a tight liver. This is how inner organs can affect other areas of the body. So what's happening is that our primary dysfunction are playing themselves out through the body. The body is struggling to compensate. Let's say you grew up in a family that never's had any boundaries, and your boundaries been crossed in every single relationship you've lived in. And you've just taken it on, taken it on, taken it on. Your liver is stopped detoxifying. It starts to contract, 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 holding back the impulse of anger inside of the liver. Um, your body then essentially is is in the state of freeze. The liver starts to become in the state of freeze, and the tightness of that liver affects your whole body system, even your muscles. And now you move wrong and you try to fix something, try to put a nail in the wall with your hammer, and all of a sudden your shoulder starts hurting. And you're like, oh yeah, my shoulder started hurting because of the nail. No, it's a lifelong process of you haven't setting boundaries. It's a lifelong process of you, of even your family never been taught how to actually individuate properly and how to express anger. And so this is the way that we need to look under the surface. Your back pains, all of this, um, chronic pains that we have in the body, digestive issues, all of this ties into a deeper underlying thing that has its origins in our family, in our own childhood, and even in the lives of our mother, great grandmother, great grandfather, and so on. And first, we have to understand how deep that is to really understand what we're working with here. And then we we slowly start to understand and make our way to listen to our body. We start to really decode our body. We start to learn when exactly did those pains start. And then when you investigate, you notice that these kinds of things, they start in specific moments in our life. Chronic issues start appearing in specific moments in our lives. Mm, issues of the skin, for example, a client I was working with, she had an issue on the skin. Um, uh, the moment, like she had a psoriasis on the inside of her arms, and she was raising her child, and the moment she did it, we traced it back into the time when she first had to introduce her child to kindergarten. She started to get really itchy arms. And then we looked at where exactly are is the psoriasis showing up? And you see it exactly showing up where she would hold her child. So the body is showing us here that it's struggling to compensate with the separation of her baby boy. Okay, so this is how intelligent the body is. It's really showing itself in these intelligent ways. And the first step is to really honor that and then investigate when did it first start and what life situations changed during that period. This is how we can slowly start to investigate. And of course, it's very deep. So we're not going to just get all the answers by ourselves, but to really feel how those life situations made us feel in that moment. Sitting down and feeling, how did I feel? I felt very helpless. I felt very angry. I felt very sad. That's what's been going on there. Maybe I haven't really honored that. And now the body is expressing that in a way.
Mm. And what are some ways then to do this emotional release with these emotions that are showing up as physical symptoms, as skin issues or whatever it might be? What are some of the ways then to release these emotions? I know that you have developed the method Neo emotional release method, right? If you would like to share how your work is, yeah, being sort of played out in the world with your clients.
Yeah, so essentially, I was looking for tools in the therapy world. I was looking for ways to address the body in the medical world, but I didn't find that much. And so when I discovered that emotions are central to the healthy regulation of the body and mind, I understood there needs to be something new birthed here. Like I said earlier, a doctor only sees one part of you, a psychotherapist only sees one part of you. We need experts who are able to put these two together to understand how your emotional wounds create symptoms in the body and how your symptoms are tied to your childhood and your history and your emotions. And this is essentially what neo-emotional release is. It's an approach to directly work with the repressed emotional energy in our body. And our emotions are so central. They are essentially our repressed life force that hasn't been liberated. And these are fragments of ourselves, files of trauma that haven't been allowed to fully be expressed. And they play themselves out as emotional blockages in form of triggers. So you get triggered multiple times a day. That's a sign of an emotional block. Or they show themselves as a symptom in the body, or both. And this is a sign that there's repressed emotion in your body that is trying to find liberation, trying to reintegrate into your dignity, into your wholeness. And so this approach is designed to directly do this. And it's an approach that tries to not replace, but complement the current market of what's available. So you have your osteopath, that's also highly physical. You have your chiropractor, that's all physical, physio, right? And then you have a psychotherapist, that's mental. You have a coach, that's also mental. But where is that all that coming together? In new emotion release, it's all coming together and understanding how your liver impulses, what they say about how you're not setting boundaries, how to then release that liver and allow your anger to fully allow to be there, how to bring you in contact with the deep grief that you haven't been able to process because the loss of your best friend or your last breakup, or because even your grandmother lost someone meaningful to them that you're carrying inside of yourself. So this is a path that is available. We're training people globally. It's a global alliance of people that um, is available to treat human beings in this primary dysfunction of not being able to feel their own repressed emotions, which are wreaking havoc in the body, which are creating all these dysfunctions.
Mm. I've also heard you share and talk about how there's different stages of an emotional release. Would you like to share a little bit on of that perspective? Like, what are the different stages of an emotional release?
Yeah, so I think one of the things is that when people hear emotion release, a lot of times their reaction is that they get scared of it because like, wow, that looks crazy, that looks insane, that looks like something that could be unhealthy, or they come from a more therapeutic psychologically informed lens, and it's like, no, you're not allowed to have your emotions. That's re-traumatizing, and it needs to be slower, and all of that, and that's all false information. But it's interesting how many different reactions you can find. So, because fundamental to this work is something very simple. It's the radical permission to be yourself, to be who you are. People start crying when I work with them, even before they lay down on the table, because just they feel a permission that they can just fall apart here. It's not like, oh, yeah, we have 40 minutes. This treatment is over. Then let me check your psoas muscle and then we'll be on with the treatment. No, the physiotherapist, the massage therapist, the osteos, and the osteos are more sensitive to this, but they're not, these are body therapists that are not aware that they're poking around in the psyche of another human being when they're working on the physical body. They're not aware, they're not opening that door up of there's actually an emotional process wanting to organize here, but you're just working on the physical part of it. If you're not allowing the emotion to express, then nothing can change. So this is the key to new emotion release. It's like the radical permission to express yourself, how and who you are with your emotions. It needs that permission because your nervous system doesn't know how to feel safe with expressing sadness and anger and all these different crazy impulses that are in your body. So the permission is everything. When that happens, the shame is lifted. The shame is lifted of who you feel you are, the shame of being vulnerable, the shame of expressing how you really are. Once that happens, the rest is techniques. The rest is that's the primary healing mechanism here, the welcoming. The rest is techniques, pressure, using pressure points at some points, using very specific verbal guidance, which uses systemic guidance, for example, reintroducing your mother and saying things you couldn't express to her, working with the liver, for example, working with different organs, allowing these organs to be witnessed and in your awareness to feel what wisdom they hold within you. The organs themselves hold impulses in them, and they are informing you now because they're repressing. For example, if your bladder is repressing, your liver is repressing your lung, those are actually signs which can teach you how to live your life better because they're saying to you how you're actually living your life in a dysfunctional way. And so when we can reintroduce those impulses, for example, from the bladder, let's say you make your bladder your teacher, right? Sounds weird. Sounds like something that we wouldn't do when we think, okay, I have symptoms, like I want my just make my symptoms go away. I don't want to have any pain. Wait a minute. Your symptoms are an intelligent expression of your body. Your bladder is communicating with you in an intelligent way. And your bladder can actually tell you how to live your life in a more functional way. Sounds weird, but what does this mean? Your bladder, if you have, for example, a bladder, um, like a bladder infection, or if you have a bladder that you always have to go to the bathroom, when I've worked with clients who have these specific dysfunctions, there's very meaningful things that are within the intelligence of the bladder that can help the person to live. So, for example, going frequently to the bathroom was a sign for a woman, for multiple women I work with, to take their space. They didn't allow themselves to take their space. They were ashamed of taking their space, of taking their time. And so the bladder was mirroring them. You need to take your time here. You need to, I'm going to push you to more frequently take space for yourself. That was one thing. Bladder infections frequently occur in women after intercourse. So there's also a pattern here of boundaries. So oftentimes when the boundaries are very weak, the bladder starts to get infected because it's showing up that you don't have your space, you don't feel safe in your space, and there's a fundamental safety lacking. And this is essentially showing up as an infection in the bladder. And like I said, infection is an inflammation also. Inflammation is tied to anger. So there's a lack of boundary there. There's a lack of setting your space, setting your boundaries, and really understanding who you want to let in to your space and really feeling at home in that space. All of this intelligence around how to live your life is in your organs. Your organs can be a coach. And so this is a fundamental rethinking that is happening on for most people. If you talk about the people that are seeing their symptoms as a pest, right? They just want to have less pain. They just want to get rid of it, want to get rid of. But if you flip that whole thing around and say, wait a minute, all of that is your teacher. It can teach you how to live your life from more potential that fundamentally changes. And so neo-emotion release is creating a space to reevaluate how we communicate with our body, how we really come in contact with our physical vessel, the thing that we've been living in, that's been experiencing all of these beautiful experiences. It wants to be our best friend. So, how do we make our body our best friend? How do we access an internal state of health and safety and well being and power? And neo emotion release moves through different stages to do just that. And it has a stage which confronts the internal blockages, which are held within the body. So, first, there's a grounding stage where there's the body is really grounded and the awareness is grounded within the body and safety is established. And then emotional material that was repressed is automatically introduced into the body. And this is already a place where this approach differs a lot from other approaches like breathwork or somatic experiencing. For example, because somatic experiencing is the most popular approach for trauma work, the most widespread. But somatic experiencing, I'm not going to critique or slander any approach. I think it's important. All approaches have their way, have all approaches work also, and there's different people for different approaches, and it's super important we have diverse approaches on healing. But one of the problems is that there's a very controlled element to it. There is an internalized fear of re-traumatization in the practitioners. There is, and this means that there's a fundamental lack of trust in the body intelligence. The body only introduces to you what it's ready for. The body only introduces to you what it's ready for. And then a somatic practitioner would say, well, if that's true, then how do you explain re-traumatization when there's too much coming up too fast and all this? Re-traumatization is not an issue of what's happening during the session. It's an issue of integration. It's an issue of a big body process being present and not enough time in witnessing presence and resources to integrate that process. It's not that the body is not aware of how much to bring into the session. The body knows exactly how much emotions, how much it can handle, and how safe it is to bring that up. The body is widely intelligent. If you don't trust that intelligence, then why are you working with the body? Do you think your idea, your mentalization, your idea of how fast the body should heal is superior than the body's? No, it's not. And so, what somatic experiencing practitioners do differently is really looking for this controlled aspect, doing it very, very slow. It's very, very safe, but oftentimes ineffective because they essentially treat every person like they are severely traumatized because this approach was developed by people for people who are highly, highly traumatized, like war, car crashes, severe abuse, and all of that. But most people, they haven't gone through that. So we shouldn't treat people like that. It's like treating marathon runners like they have a broken leg. Like that is not an appropriate way of treating them. And so that's what I was seeing. And that's why I was, and this is actually, these are not my words. This critique, when I'm speaking here, is the critique of a senior somatic experience trainer that has trained people officially. These are his words of saying they're afraid of re-traumatization. This is why he has developed his own approach called ISP. The guy is called Dr. Raja Selvam, who is a doctor who's trained for somatic experiencing. So a lot of somatic work out there is being informed by this approach, which is essentially still fearful of the body intelligence, of really holding and showing up for the whole process there, really showing up for what the body intelligence wants to reveal. And that then becomes something so much deeper than what your mind can handle and the concepts of how healing should happen. It becomes something so almost mysterious. It becomes something that I don't label this approach that way, but it almost becomes something shamanic because you're dealing with a much, much vaster intelligence than you can comprehend in that moment. And really allowing that in, really welcoming that this is what's supposed to happen and that you can trust your body is something that is so transformational and so healing. Besides just feeling that you are welcome and you're okay how you are and lifting that shame and that radical acceptance, allowing that the body can fully express its own healing process is um, is wild, is really transformational for the most people. And this
Mm.
is where I would say most of the transformation comes from and why we can target specific symptoms and these symptoms dissipate or disappear when we work with the emotion in this way.
Mm. It's so like liberating and inspiring to hear you talk about this topic, and one thing that I'm curious to hear you talk about is because I've heard you talk before about like how there's an activation stage within the emotional release, right? That some people maybe tend to get stuck in or get sort of attached to this activation stage, and I'm curious to hear your perspective on that. Like, yeah, how do we move through the activation stage to really release the emotion, right?
Exactly. You're pointing it out. There's two shadows there. There's the shadow of trying to like only build resources, only go super safe, go super slow, but I'm really actually afraid of the body doing what it needs to do. And then the other is going only in the activation, only screaming, only loud crying, and the high energy states. Um, these are the two shadows of the work, and they meet in new emotion release. Essentially, both stages need to happen. There needs to be a time where emotions are fully invited in. The intensity of the energy that's in the body is already there and it's naturally rising to the surface. And that needs to be allowed, that process. Then, after that, and not before that, needs to be a process of repatterning and integrating that energy. Repatterning happens by placing, for example, the anger. Now you have this anger coming up. You have all this anger. Who does that anger belong to? Does it belong to your mother? Does it belong to your father? Is it from your inner child towards your sister? When we can place that anger, direct that anger to where it belongs, it then integrates in the right direction and the cycle completes. The reason why the anger was there is now resolute. It's now found a resolution. It's like the anger was held back because it's meant for your father. Now you tell your father this, and now the anger dissipates because its job is complete. So there needs to be a repatterning in the nervous system in the way that the body is expressing that emotion, not just a loud cathartic screaming, whatever. This is just part of the healing. But if you just stay in that activation stage, what actually happens is you're not going deep enough to feel what is the emotion that you're actually resisting. Because if you're always screaming, 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 anger is not what you're resisting in that moment. What you're resisting is might be a deep, deep, deep helplessness, a deep, deep, deep grief underneath the anger. And you need help from a skilled practitioner to guide you underneath the anger to the helplessness that you're avoiding. So essentially, people just stay in the emotions they're comfortable with and re-express those. And I wouldn't say that that's re-traumatizing, and that's a bit extreme to use that word for this, but it definitely keeps them stuck on that level and it doesn't change anything.
Mm. That's so interesting. I noticed that the time is running so fast, and there's so much I would like to to dive into with you. But I do think like before wrapping this conversation up, I would love to hear some thoughts from you on the topic of boundary setting. You mentioned that boundaries is a big theme for many people. That is important that we develop the skill of setting boundaries and the courage to set boundaries. Why do you think it's so hard for people to set boundaries? Like why? Why is that even a thing?
Yeah, that's a good question because boundaries are natural to our bodies. So it's not really that we need to set boundaries. The boundaries are already there. What we need to do is remove the part which is compromising the boundaries within us. When you look at people who struggle to set boundaries, when you look at their specific dynamic, how are they relating to other people? They're almost always debasing themselves. That means they're almost always placing themselves hierarchically, socially lower than the other person. And what they're doing is placing them on a pedestal, and they are in a need that is active. There's a need active that overrides their boundaries. The need is for validation, for connection. So they say, I'm not gonna set the boundaries because then I'm not gonna get my needs met. I'm not gonna get the connection, the validation, whatever I need from that person. And that has a price. You don't have boundaries, you take on their dysregulated states, you take on their negativity, and that is harmful for your body, physically harmful for your body. And so it's not only about like, I'm going to set a boundary. That's the beginning stage of like, okay, I need to actually learn how to set a boundary. Yes, you need to set a boundary. That's good. But it's about what parts of you, what neediness inside of you are you not aware of that you need from that other person? Because that's the part that compromises your own boundaries. So that's what you need to ask yourself. What do you need from the person that you struggle to set boundary against? Because if you understand what you need, you can give this to yourself. That quality is inherent to your being, and you can feel that you already have 1%, 2%, 5% of that quality. And then can you breathe into this? Can you expand it? Can you hold yourself with that quality and then expand it so you don't need to outsource it outside of yourself? And then what you notice is once you meet that need, the boundary is naturally restored. You don't actually need anything from the person anymore, and the boundary is naturally drawn.
Mm. I guess that's the theme for our conversation to like the importance of looking layers below the surface. What we think is the sort of solution might not always be the solution, but what is deeper below the layers. I'm so grateful for this hour with you, David, and I'm curious to hear before I let you go here, if you were to reach the whole world for 30 seconds, what is something that you would like to share with them or maybe even do with them for like 30 seconds?
Oh my God, so much pressure. Let me take a moment. I would say, I would say, listen, everyone. There's a new path. You've been ignoring your body. By tuning into your body, you can become friends with your body, and that means you can have a relationship with your symptoms, with your diseases, and with your emotions. You can make your disease your teacher. Start to tune in. Become as interested in your iPhone as in your body as you become into your iPhone, and tune into the reels playing inside of your body, and befriend the impulses and learn from the language that their body is speaking to you.
Mm. That's beautiful. Powerful words. Thank you, David. And for the listeners who would like to get in touch with you or dive deeper into your world and your work, where can they find you?
Yeah, so exciting news. We're gonna launch a new form of yoga really soon, by the way. It's called Neo Yoga, which is developed by us therapists who've seen the yoga space and just are tired of the kind of only physical, postural, structural approach of yoga, and bringing all the emotional release, radical, unshaming, welcoming the emotions into the practice. We're going to launch that very, very soon. Um, and if you want to be ahead with all of our developments, all of our trainings that we do. We train hundreds of people every year in this approach, in this global alliance. If you want to join the global alliance or want to find a practitioner, just go to our Instagram page or to our website at emotionreleases.com.
Mm. Perfect. Thank you so much, David, for all your wisdom and your perspectives and all your light that you're sharing and has been sharing with us today. So thank you so much. Thank you for being here with us today, for showing up for the expansion of your own mind and your own heart in this space. If you enjoyed this conversation, I would love it if you took a moment to share this conversation on your story and tag me so that we can keep the conversation going even after the end of this episode. And another way to support the show is to leave a review in the app where you're listening. I'm so looking forward to hear your reflections, your perspectives and insights insights after listening to this conversation. Once again, thank you for being here with us today.